Chapter 1. A Morning in the Smoky Village. Mist rolled over the smoky village in slow, lazy swirls, wrapping around crooked rooftops and cobblestone streets like a soft blanket. Smoke drifted from chimneys in long, curling tendrils, carrying the scent of roasted bread, herbs, and something faintly mystical, like someone had sprinkled a pinch of magic into the air overnight. The sun rose slowly, faintly glowing through the haze, casting golden beams that refracted across puddles on the cobblestones. The whole village seemed to breathe with a kind of lazy rhythm, unbothered by time, and Wise loved it. He leaned against the cabin doorway, one boot propped against the frame, staff resting casually on his shoulder. His hair stuck out in chaotic tufts, and his eyes squinted at the morning light. Somewhere nearby, a bird with glowing wings squawked lazily, knocking over a lantern mid-flight and catching it again with its tail. A baker juggled dough that twisted into impossible geometric shapes as it spun in the air, while a three-tailed cat yawned across the rooftops, stretching and sliding down a chimney, like it had done it 1,000 times before. Wise stretched, letting his back pop, and exhaled a long puff of smoke from the rolled leaf between his fingers. Ah, morning in the smoky village. You never change, he muttered, watching the smoke curl lazily into the sky. He swirled his cup of thick black coffee, inhaling its warm, bitter aroma mixed with faint hints of roasted earth and herbs, and smiled. Inside his cabin, the kitchen was a cluttered paradise of chaos. A kettle whistled on the stove, its steam rising in soft green and gold haze. Eggs sizzled in a pan, some glowing faintly as if they'd been kissed by the forest itself. Tiny jars of powders lined the windowsill, some marked, "Do not open unless you're feeling brave," others mildly explosive, probably. A globe spun slowly on the counter, casting tiny clouds that rained glitter over a miniature village carved into its surface. The faint scent of incense mixed with smoke from his leaf, curling in ribbons around him. Wise cracked a grin, flicking the leaf with a finger to make the smoke dance. "Yeah, perfect start," he murmured, flipping an egg expertly in the pan with a flourish. The yolk didn't break. It hovered, suspended for a beat, and then landed perfectly on the plate. Even breakfast had a little magic here. He poured himself another mug of coffee, letting the warmth seep into his hands, the bitter aroma wrapping around his senses like a soft hug. Sitting at the little table by the window, he watched the village stir. Children chased floating lights that swirled like will-o'-the-wisps, giggling as they wove between market stalls. A merchant set up a stall selling glowing fruit that smelled like summer caught in a jar, while a blacksmith hammered glowing metal into shapes that looked more like art than weapons. Wise took a bite of his eggs, chewing slowly, savoring the buttery richness and the faint spark of magic that seemed to hum in each piece. He exhaled smoke and leaned back, letting it swirl around him lazily. This is living," he murmured. "Eggs, coffee, smoke, and no deadlines." He chuckled, rolling the leaf between his fingers. "Maybe a little chaos, too, but that's optional." A fox-like creature with 6 ears padded past, sniffing curiously at the plate of eggs. "Hey, Marbles," Wise said, scratching the little creature behind the ears. "Yeah, I know. You want some, but you're going to have to wait." Marbles yipped and disappeared behind a stack of crates, leaving a faint trail of sparkling dust behind him. Wise leaned back further, eyes half closed, sipping coffee and letting the morning stretch on. He exhaled another lazy ribbon of smoke, watching it twist and curl in the light. Each puff was like a meditation, each sip of coffee a slow wave of warmth and clarity. He could feel the village's heartbeat, a quiet pulse beneath the mist and chimneys, and it made him grin. "The world's slow today," he said softly, blowing a smoke ring that drifted across the table and hovered for a second before bursting into a faint sparkle. Perfect. Hours passed in a haze of comfort. Wise refilled his coffee, watched the villagers go about their rituals, and lit more of his favorite leaf. He flipped eggs, stirred pots, exhaled smoke, and listened to the soft hum of the village life around him. A group of children floated tiny kites that glimmered like liquid light, chasing them through puddles that refracted rainbows into the morning mist. Somewhere, a bard strummed a lute, notes lingering in the air in impossible shapes, twisting around lanterns and smoke into patterns that made your mind feel both relaxed and slightly buzzy. Wise watched it all, smiling, shaking his head. "Man, only place to be," he said, exhaling a long plume. Only place to be. He leaned back in his chair, tapping the end of his staff lazily on the floor, watching smoke swirl over rooftops and mist curl around lampposts. His eggs were gone, his coffee almost finished, and the morning had stretched so slowly it felt like he could sit here forever. And, in a way, he could. The smoky village existed outside Rush, outside worry, outside the normal rules of time. Wise's thoughts drifted lazily to the dankwood forest beyond the village edge. He hadn't gone yet, not today, but he could feel it calling in the back of his mind, whispering through the mist. Soon, soon, he said, taking another slow sip of coffee. We'll wander, we'll see, we'll chill, and maybe trip a little. He leaned his head back, exhaling one final plume of smoke, watching it curl toward the chimney and mix with the morning mist. Around him, the village pulsed quietly with life. Birds chirped, cats yawned, merchants hummed, and somewhere a dog barked lazily at a floating fruit. Wise smiled. He was a simple human in a world full of impossible creatures, and for this morning, that was more than enough. He finished the last of his coffee, tapped the end of his staff on the cobblestone with a lazy rhythm, and whispered, "All right, forest waits. But for now, life is perfect." Smoke curled one last time around him. The eggs' warmth lingered in his belly, and the smoky village exhaled slowly, a soft, magical sigh that made Wise grin. And somewhere deep in the mist, the forest whispered back. Chapter 2. Through Dankwood Forest, Part 1. Mist curled along the forest floor like lazy snakes, thick and wet, clinging to Wise's boots and making every step feel like walking through a dream. He adjusted the strap of his satchel and exhaled a long plume of smoke from the last bit of his morning leaf, watching it curl through the shaft of morning light that filtered down from the canopy above. The Dankwood Forest wasn't just a forest. It was a living, breathing being with moods, quirks, and a sense of humor. The moss underfoot pulsed faintly as he stepped, tiny spores sparkling like stars caught in a gentle whirl. Vines twisted into impossible spirals, some forming arches that almost seemed to bend the air itself. Leaves swayed lazily in midair, casting shadows that formed fleeting words before dissolving into nothing. The forest watched him, whispered to him, teased him, and Wise smiled. "Morning, Dankwood," he muttered, tapping his staff against the mossy ground. "Hope you're feeling chill today." A rustle of movement drew his gaze. From between two massive oaks, Charizard emerged. Human, but different, calm, grounded. Even in this chaos of magic and mist, he seemed like a rock in a river, steady and unshakable. His dark hair gleamed in the dappled sunlight, and his eyes held the quiet heat of fire magic that hummed faintly beneath the surface. His robe was singed at the edges, not from carelessness, but from the constant subtle control of flames he carried with him. "Wise," Charizard said, his voice even and warm, carrying natural authority. "You're late." Wise laughed, exhaling smoke lazily. "Late? Nah, I arrive exactly when the forest deems fit." He flicked ash from his leaf into a swirl of floating spores, watching it drift in the mist. "Besides, mornings are for vibes, not deadlines." Charizard inclined his head, faintly smiling, or maybe just approving. He didn't smoke, didn't joke, didn't overthink. He simply walked with purpose. Hands lightly glowing would contain fire magic. "Your vibes nearly set the forest on fire last time," he said. "Let's try not to actually burn it down today." Wise grinned. "Yeah, fair. Forest insurance, right? You're my insurance, buddy." They stepped deeper into the forest, the air thickening with magic. Mushrooms glowed like tiny lanterns along the path, some clustered into shapes that seemed deliberate. Rings, spirals, even faces that winked when Wise looked too closely. A stream cut through the undergrowth, its waters shimmering with rainbow hues, and tiny fish leapt through the air like liquid light. Wise crouched beside the stream, dipping a hand into the cool water. "Perfect," he muttered, letting droplets shimmer and dissolve in the morning mist. This is exactly the kind of magic I need before a long trek." He exhaled a slow plume of smoke, letting it drift over the sparkling water. Charizard watched him silently, one hand glowing faintly with fire magic. When a vine tried to tangle around Wise's ankle, Charizard flicked his wrist, and the air shimmered as a tiny flame licked the vine, forcing it to curl back harmlessly. Wise clapped him on the shoulder. Thanks, buddy. Seriously, you're like a personal forest firewall. They moved through winding paths, stepping over roots that writhe like snakes and around rocks that pulse faintly like heartbeat stones. The forest seemed playful, mischievous even. One root would twist under his foot if he lingered too long. A glowing mushroom would wobble like it had a mind of its own. Wise laughed. Man, it's like the forest is daring me to pay attention. Not that I wouldn't want to. Birds flew overhead with feathers like melted glass, leaving sparkling trails as they swooped through the shafts of sunlight. A tiny creature peeked from behind a tree trunk, 6 legs quivering, eyes like liquid gold. Wise waved lazily. Yeah, hi there. Don't eat me, okay? The creature blinked and disappeared in a puff of sparkling dust. Hours passed in a haze of sight, sound, and smell. Wise stopped occasionally to sip from his flask of coffee, letting the warmth mingle with the lingering smoke from his leaf. Charizard remained steady, walking with measured steps, occasionally letting a fingertip flare briefly with fire magic to light the way or clear a hazard. Wise exhaled a long plume of smoke, watching it curl through the forest canopy. You know, he mused, life is pretty simple when it's just you, coffee, smoke, and a forest full of weird little critters. Charizard's eyes flicked to him. Simple, yes. Dangerous, too. Don't forget dangerous. Wise grinned. Danger's just part of the flavor. Makes the coffee taste better. Chapter 2. Through Dankwood Forest. Part 2. The Fire and the Smoke Sesh. The path widened as they went deeper into Dankwood, the mist curling over their boots like slow-moving clouds. Shafts of light broke through the canopy in golden beams, illuminating tiny motes that danced lazily in the air, glittering like embers caught mid-flight. Wise inhaled deeply, letting the scents of wet moss, pine, and faint metallic tang drift into his senses. He exhaled a ribbon of smoke from his leaf, watching it twist around the shafts of light like a lazy dragon. Man, he muttered, leaning on his staff, you could get lost in this forest, and honestly, it'd be a trip. Not dangerous, just vibes. Charizard's calm presence moved alongside him. His fire magic hummed quietly beneath the surface, the tips of his fingers flickering faintly, illuminating the underbrush with a warm, subtle glow whenever they passed a shadowed patch. Unlike Wise, he didn't need smoke or coffee to feel alive. He was alive, steady and warm, a human ember in a forest that was both playful and unpredictable. Eventually, they came to a small clearing. The light poured in from above, highlighting mushrooms that glowed like tiny neon lanterns. Tiny creatures peeked from behind tree roots, 6-legged and shimmering with faint gold. A stream cut through the clearing, its water sparkling like liquid prisms. Wise grinned. This is perfect, he said, dropping his satchel. Little interlude before the tower. Tiny forest paradise. He crouched, dipping a hand into the cold, shimmering water. The forest seemed to hum in response, moss quivering, mushrooms pulsing faintly. Perfect for, a little coffee, a little smoke. Charizard raised an eyebrow. Coffee and smoke again? Wise waved a hand lazily. Yes, always. Part of the ritual. He pulled out a flask of warm, dark coffee from his satchel and poured a small amount into a mug he kept folded inside. The smell curled around him instantly, warm and earthy, mingling with a damp forest aroma. He inhaled deeply, letting the scent wrap around him like a blanket. Charizard knelt, placing his hands together briefly and letting a tiny flicker of flame flare to life between them. With a subtle motion, a small fire sprang into being, crackling gently in the clearing. Here, he said simply, safe fire. We'll warm up before heading further. Wise's eyes gleamed. You just made this moment perfect, buddy. He dropped onto a mossy patch, sipping coffee as Charizard's flame licked the air with golden warmth. Okay, now smoke sesh time. He rolled a new leaf with practiced fingers and lit it from Charizard's fire. The smoke curled into intricate, lazy spirals, drifting toward the canopy and mingling with the mist. The two of them sat there, side by side, a human fire mage and a stoner human, the forest alive around them. Mushrooms pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat beneath the forest floor. Tiny glowing insects darted between the trees, leaving faint trails of light. A fox-like creature with 6 ears padded across the clearing, paused, sniffed the smoke, then disappeared with a faint sparkle. Wise leaned back, exhaling slowly, watching smoke ribbons curl lazily through the golden shaft of light. "Man," he said, voice low and content. This is a life. Coffee warm, fire warming, smoke swirling. Dankwit, you're a gem." Charizard didn't comment, but he let the fire pulse gently, the warmth radiating outward. The flicker illuminated his calm face, firelight reflecting in his eyes, steady and grounding. Wise's gaze shifted between the flames and the misty forest, feeling a connection to both. "This forest, it's alive, right?" Wise said softly, "I mean, it feels alive. Watching. Playful. Mischievous. It teases you, nudges you, makes you question if you're seeing things." He tapped a mushroom that glimmered bright blue. "I swear this one just winked at me." Charizard's hand moved, and the fire responded, flames flaring slightly, enough to light a nearby vine that had begun to droop toward the clearing. The vine recoiled instantly, curling back harmlessly. Wise laughed. "See? Forest insurance, buddy. You're amazing." They lingered, sipping coffee and passing the leaf between them. Smoke swirled lazily through the air, curling around mushrooms, climbing the sides of gnarled trees, and fading into the morning mist. Every now and then, a small creature would peek from behind a tree or mossy rock, curious about the humans in the clearing. Wise waved lazily to each one. "All right, little friends. Don't mind me. Just living life, enjoying smoke and coffee, chilling with a fire mage." Hours seemed to stretch, a slow, languid passage of time that only a forest like Dankwood could deliver. Wise rolled onto his back in the moss, watching shafts of light shift through the canopy. He tapped his staff lazily. "Man, it's like the whole forest is showing me a movie. Just quiet scenes, no rush, everything's mellow." Charizard leaned back against a tree trunk, fire humming faintly at his fingertips, steady, controlled. He didn't smoke. He didn't sip coffee. He just was a contrast of Wise's haze of leaf smoke, coffee, and meandering thoughts. But somehow, the combination was perfect. After a long, lazy pause, Wise sat up, stretching. "Okay, session's over. Forest vibes absorbed. Now onward." He gestured toward the faint trail that wound upward, the edges of the clearing glowing with tiny, luminous flowers. Wizard Tower waits. Directions to Cloudwatch Peak, Smoky Market, big plans. Charizard stood, flames flickering briefly as he stepped onto the path, signaling the way. Wise followed, the smoke curling behind him like a lazy banner. The forest seemed to hum, pushing him onward with gentle breezes and whispering leaves. As they wound higher, the canopy thinned. Shafts of sunlight turned the mist into liquid gold, illuminating moss-covered rocks and mushrooms pulsing faintly in purple and blue. Tiny creatures darted between the underbrush, some shy, some curious, some bold enough to playfully tug at Wise's sleeve or hover above Charizard's head, only to vanish when he turned. "Almost there," Wise murmured, exhaling a last lazy puff before dropping the spent leaf. "Towers up ahead, and then, who knows? Cloudwatch Peak. Smoky Market adventure." Charizard's hand flared slightly, a small control flame warming the path ahead, guiding them like a living lantern. Wise smiled, leaning on his staff, watching the smoke dissipate into the light. "Man, life simple but perfect. Forest, fire mage, coffee, smoke, adventure, perfect." Finally, the trees thinned completely, and ahead, the trippy wizard tower leaned impossibly at angles, glowing faintly with colors that didn't exist in the regular world. Moss climbed its sides in spirals, and floating lanterns drifted lazily around the top. Tiny streams of smoke from the chimney curled into the morning mist. Wise let out a long exhale, smoke curling around his face, and grinned. "All right, Wizard Tower. Let's see what chaos you've got for us." Charizard flicked his hand, fire magic flaring gently to light the path. Wise followed, coffee in hand, heart thumping in that lazy, excited rhythm only a stoner human in a magical forest could feel. The Dankwood Forest had been alive, playful, and mesmerizing, but ahead, beyond the mushrooms, mist, and swirling smoke, lay the next stage of their journey. And Wise knew, with Charizard by his side, coffee in hand, and smoke drifting lazily in the air, anything was possible. Chapter 3. Crystal Lake and the Frogheads. The forest began to thin as Charizard and Wise followed the winding trail toward the trippy wizard tower. But somewhere along the way, the trees gave way to an open, shimmering expanse. "Ah, look at that," Wise muttered, exhaling a lazy curl of smoke from the leaf he'd rolled earlier. The smoke swirled in the sunlight, drifting above the glimmering water like tiny, dancing spirits. Crystal Lake. The lake stretched wide, perfectly still like liquid glass. The surface reflected the sky, the treetops, and the occasional drifting clouds so perfectly it was hard to tell where the water ended and the world began. Tiny waves licked the edges of the shore, leaving trails of sparkling dust wherever they touched. Mushrooms and reeds poked out along the edges, glowing faintly in iridescent blues and purples, casting little flickers of light into the water. Charizard walked beside Wise silently, letting the lake speak to them without words. The fire magic around his hands glimmered faintly, warm in the air as they approached, though he didn't light a fire. That calm presence, always steady, always grounded, was somehow the perfect counterpoint to the lake's trippy, hypnotic reflections. Wise stepped closer to the water's edge, staff tapping lazily on the ground, and took a deep breath. "Man, this is wow." He exhaled another slow plume of smoke. Perfect for, well, whatever. And then he saw them. Floating lazily on a giant lily pad in the center of the lake were two figures, lounging like the world was theirs and time didn't exist. Dave and Hash. Both were humans with giant frog heads, impossibly serene yet somehow mischievous, puffing on tiny pipes filled with the finest dwarf weed. Smoke curled from their mouths in lazy rings, drifting over the glassy water, mingling with the reflections of clouds and sky. Dave was sprawled back, one arm dangling over the edge of the lily pad, while Hash had his legs crossed like a meditative monk, puffing thoughtfully. "Wise! Char! Over here!" Dave croaked in surprisingly human tone, the frog head booming yet melodic. "Finally, took you long enough." Hash laughed, a low croak that vibrated like a bass note through the water. "Don't mind Dave, he's dramatic. Smoke some. Chill, all good vibes here." Wise laughed, exhaling a lazy puff of smoke. Perfect timing. "Hey, my dudes!" He stepped closer to the shore, boots crunching on the wet pebbles. "I brought coffee, though. Might not float as nicely as you guys, but hey, it's magic." Charizard's eyes flicked briefly to the frog-headed humans. He didn't comment on the smoking, didn't puff anything, didn't even smile, but his fire magic flickered faintly in acknowledgement, a warm, steady pulse that reminded everyone that he had their backs. Dave waved a hand lazily. "Bring it over, Wise. Just toss the mug onto the water or something. We'll figure it out." Wise grinned and carefully floated the mug over the glassy surface, with minor enchantment from his staff, letting it drift to the lily pad. He took a careful step into the water and summoned a small floating plank of wood to help him balance. Coffee delivered. Now smoke and chill, yes? Dave and Ash passed him a tiny, glowing pipe. Wise inhaled, letting the familiar warmth curl through him, watching smoke rise like tiny spirals of light against the lake's reflections. He exhaled slowly, letting the smoke drift over the water. Yeah, this is life. The lake around them seemed to pulse in rhythm with their breathing, faint ripples moving outward from the lily pad. Light bent strangely, colors shimmering and twisting like melted rainbows. Tiny fish leapt lazily from the water, leaving trails of sparkling droplets. Mushrooms along the lake's edge glimmered, casting dancing light patterns across their faces. Charizard stepped closer, fire magic warming the air subtly. He didn't touch the weed, didn't even speak much, but he leaned on his staff and let his gaze sweep the lake. There was a calm, grounding energy around him, steadying the haze of smoke and reflections. Wise leaned against him, exhaling a long curl of smoke. "Man, can't even describe it," Wise murmured. "The lake, the smoke, Char, and you two lunatics floating there. Perfect combo." Dave croaked a laugh. "Flattery gets you more hits of dwarf weed, Wise." Hash added, "Or at least a lighter flame, eh?" He winked with one enormous frog eye, the smoke from his pipe curling lazily into the sky. They settled into a rhythm. Coffee sipped, smoke puffed, Fire warmth radiating gently from Charizard. The lake shimmered, reflecting clouds, forests, and floating mushroom lights like a living kaleidoscope. Wise felt that slow, blissful heartbeat of the world, letting it pulse through him. Hours seemed to pass, or maybe minutes. But time didn't matter. Dave passed another pipe. Hash hummed lazily. Wise rolled another leaf, exhaling smoke that mingled with the lake mist. The forest beyond, the trail to the Trippy Wizard Tower, all waited. But for now, the lake, the fire, the smoke, and their strange little crew were enough. Soon, Wise murmured finally, leaning back on the lily pad. We'll have to get moving. Tower directions, Cloudwatch Peak, Smoky Market. Charizard's fire magic pulsed subtly, highlighting the edges of the lily pad. The lake isn't going anywhere. Take your time. Wise grinned. Yeah, just a few more hits. Then adventure. Promise. He inhaled, exhaled, letting smoke drift lazily over shimmering reflections. The lake pulsed faintly, almost like approving him. Dave and Hash croaked their agreement. Smoke swirled around them. Fire glimmered gently from Charizard, and Wise felt completely, blissfully alive. The world of Dankwood, the lake, the lily pad, the trippy reflections, it was all perfect. Finally, Wise stood, stretching. All right, one last drag. Then we go. Wizard Tower waits. He exhaled slowly, watching smoke curl across the golden lake light. Dave and Hash waved lazily. Charizard's calm presence radiated warmth, grounding them all. Crystal Lake. Wise murmured to himself. Best stop ever before Wizard Tower chaos. Cheers to Dwarfweed, Fire Magic, and Frog-Headed friends. And with that, they stepped off the lily pad, ready to continue the journey toward the Trippy Wizard Tower, the Cloudwatch Peak, and mysterious, magical Smoky Market that waited beyond the trees. Chapter 4. The Trippy Wizard Tower, Frog Logic activated. The tower door swung open with a slow, echoing hum, like the building itself was exhaling. Colors spilled out into the air, blues, purples, oranges that didn't even have names, bleeding into mist behind them. Wise stepped in first, exhaling a slow curl of smoke. All right, everybody act normal. Dave immediately tripped over nothing. I am acting normal. Dave croaked loudly, sprawled across a floating step that wasn't there a second ago. Hash leaned over him, puffing his pipe. You fell up, man. I didn't fall up, Dave said, sitting up slowly. The ground moved down. Big difference. Charizard walked past both of them, without reacting. A faint flicker of fire traced along his fingertips as he stabilized the step Dave was sitting on. It was an illusion floor, Charizard said calmly. Dave blinked. Yeah, that's what I said. Wise snorted. No, you didn't. The staircase ahead twisted in loops, sideways spirals, and one section that appeared to go backwards into itself. Hash stared at it for a long moment. All right, he said. Counterpoint, we don't go up. Dave nodded immediately. Yeah, tower seems optional. Wise took a sip of coffee. Tower is not optional. Dave pointed at the stairs. Those stairs just winked at me. Hash squinted. They did. Charizard stepped forward, placing his foot on the first step. A small pulse of fire magic spread outward, stabilizing the structure. The staircase stopped moving, mostly. Follow my steps, Charizard said. Wise nodded. See? Easy. Just follow the fire guy. Dave raised a finger. Important question. Wise sighed. What? Dave leaned in. What if the fire guy's wrong? Charizard didn't even look back. I'm not. Hash whispered to Dave. He's never wrong. It's kinda annoying. Halfway up the stairs, which now curved sideways along a wall that may or may not have been breathing, Wise stopped. All right, time out. Charizard turned slightly. We're halfway. Wise nodded. Exactly. Halfway equals break time. Dave immediately sat down. Yes, finally. I've been emotionally preparing for this moment. Hash already had his pipe out. I never stopped preparing. Wise rolled another leaf, lighting it from a small flame Charizard flicked without even looking. Dave watched the flame. Man, you ever think about how Char is just a walking lighter? Charizard. No. Hash. I have. Frequently. Wise exhaled a long plume of smoke that drifted sideways, then upward, then formed a spiral that stayed there. Okay, yeah, this tower is messing with the airflow. Wise said. Dave poked the floating smoke. It's solid. Hash leaned in. Bro, don't touch the smoke. Dave touched it again. It touched me back. Wise laughed. All right, that's enough interaction with the environment. A burst of color exploded above them, and suddenly, Cody appeared upside down. Hello, travelers. Dave screamed. Why are you like that? Hash squinted. He's inverted. Wise waved casually. Yo, Cody. Cody rotated slowly until he was upright, floating midair. I sense vibes. Dave pointed at him. You scare my soul out of my body. Cody blinked. It's behind you. Dave turned around quickly. Where? There was nothing there. Hash lost it. Ha, he got you so bad. Wise stepped forward, trying to regain control. All right, Cody, we need directions. Cloudwatch Peak. Smoky Market. Cody nodded. Yes, of course. Naturally. Obviously. Dave interrupted. Also snacks. Hash added. Yeah, priority snacks. Cody snapped his fingers. A floating plate of glowing fruit appeared. Dave grabbed one instantly. Yes, this guy gets it. Hash bit into one. This tastes like purple. Wise, that's not a flavor. Hash, it is now. Charizard crosses arms. Focus. Dave, mouthful. I am focused. I'm focusing on this fruit. Cody conjured a floating map. It immediately began shifting. Mountains moved. Rivers reversed. One section just vanished. Wise squinted. Okay, so that's not stable. Cody smiled. It's dynamic. Dave leaned in. It just moved when I blinked. Hash nodded. Yeah, I don't trust it. Map's got attitude. Charizard pointed. That direction. Peak is beyond the ridge. Cody clapped. Yes, Fireman understands. Wise sighed. All right, cool. We're ignoring the map. Dave raised a hand. Can we keep the snacks? Cody. Yes. Hash. Then this was a successful mission. As they turned to leave, the staircase rotated again. Dave froze. It's doing it again. Hash grabbed his shoulder. Don't panic. Panic makes it worse. Dave immediately panicked. I'm panicking. Charizard stepped forward, fire magic pulsing outward. The stairs stabilized instantly. Wise patted him on the back. See? Fire insurance. Dave nodded seriously. Yeah, we need you. Like a lot. Hash added. You're the only thing stopping us from becoming part of the architecture. Cody waved as they descended. Good luck. Watch out for clouds. Wise paused. Why? Cody grinned. They watched back. Dave. Nope. Hash. Absolutely not. Wise laughed, exhaling one last plume of smoke as they exited the tower. All right, boys. Cloudwatch Peak. Let's see what's watching us. Dave muttered. If a cloud talks to me, I'm fighting it. Hash nodded. Yeah, we throwing hand with weather now. Charizard just kept walking. And Wise? Wise smiled, took a sip of coffee, and followed, because somehow this chaotic crew felt exactly right. Chapter 5. The road to Cloudwatch Peak. The tower faded behind them slowly, its shifting colors dissolving into mist like a dream you couldn't quite remember. Ahead, the land stretched outward, rolling hills, winding paths, and far in the distance, just barely visible through drifting clouds. Cloudwatch Peak, a city in the sky. Or at least, that's what it looked like. Wise adjusted his satchel, took a slow sip of coffee, and exhaled a relaxed plume of smoke that drifted lazily behind him. Well, there it is, boys. Dave squinted into the distance. That's a city? Hash tilted his head. Looks like clouds stacked on top of rocks. Charizard didn't stop walking. It's both. Wise grinned. Yeah, that's exactly why we're going. The path upward wasn't steep, but it was long. Smooth stone roads twisted along cliffs and ridges, occasionally dipping into patches of soft grass or cutting through narrow passes where the wind whispered like it had something to say. Clouds drifted low here, sometimes brushing against their shoulders, sometimes parting just enough to reveal glimpses of the valley below. Dave reached out and grabbed a passing cloud. "It's wet." Hash nodded. "Yeah, clouds are just sky puddles." Wise blinked. "Sky puddles is insane." Charizard. "Accurate, though." After a while, the rhythm of walking settled in, boots hitting stone, wind brushing past, the occasional swirl of smoke drifting from Wise or Dave and Hash. And then Hash started humming, low at first, then louder. Dave joined in, croaking slightly off-key but with confidence. Wise smiled. "Oh, we doing road songs now." Dave nodded seriously. "Mandatory." Charizard sighed softly. "This should be interesting." Hash started it. "Musical note, roll it. Light it, pass it to your friend." Dave came in louder. "Musical note, if the road gets weird, just smoke it till the end." Wise immediately joined, laughing midline. "Musical note coffee in my left hand, staff in my right. All three together now. Musical note walking through the clouds. Everything's all right, musical note." Charizard didn't sing, but after a moment, "Your rhythm is off," he said. Dave stopped walking. "Oh, wait, so now you got input?" Hash pointed. "Yeah, Mr. Silent Flame finally speaks." Wise laughed. "All right, Char. Fix it then. Give us tempo." Charizard paused, then tapped his foot lightly. A steady beat. "Follow that." They did, and suddenly, the song actually worked. Dave blinked. "Okay, yeah, that's better." Hash nodded. "He's the band leader now." Charizard. "I am not." As the path curved higher, the songs faded into conversation. That slow, wandering kind. The kind that only happens when you've been walking a while. Dave cleared his throat dramatically. "All right, story time." Wise groaned. "Oh no." Hash leaned in. "This is going to be good." Dave spread his arms. "So one time, I was in a swamp." "Right, Charizard. You're always in a swamp." Dave ignored him. "And this swamp had a king." Wise. "Of course it did." Dave nodded. "Frog King. Huge. Massive. Like twice my size." Hash whispered. "That's terrifying." Dave continued. "And he challenges me to a duel." Wise. "With what?" Dave paused. "Vibes." Silence. Hash lost it. "You fought a king with vibes?" Dave pointed. "And I won." Charizard. "How?" Dave grinned. "I outchilled him." Wise wiped his face. "That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard." Hash immediately jumped in. "All right, MY, turn." Wise. "This better be good." Hash nodded. "I once befriended a rock." Dave nodded seriously. "Yeah, I believe that." Charizard. "Go on." Hash continued. "Not just any rock. Talking rock." Wise. "Nope." Hash. "Yep. Told me secrets of the earth." Dave leaned in. "What kind of secrets?" Hash paused. "Mostly about worms." Wise burst out laughing. "Worms?" Hash shrugged. "They're important." Charizard. "He's not wrong." Wise turned to him. "Don't encourage this." For a while, they walked in silence. Not awkward, not empty, just calm, clouds drifting, wind whispering, footsteps steady. Wise lit another leaf, taking a slow inhale, then passing it back without even looking. Dave caught it. Hash followed. No words needed. Charizard walked beside them, fire magic faint and steady, like a heartbeat you didn't notice unless you thought about it. Wise glanced at him. "You ever get tired of us?" Charizard didn't hesitate. "No." Dave blinked. "That was fast." Hash nodded. "Yeah, that was suspiciously sincere." Charizard looked ahead. "You're chaotic, but balanced." Wise smiled softly. "Balanced chaos. I like that." The path curved one final time around a ridge, and suddenly, there it was. Cloudwatch Peak. Not just a city. A living, breathing place carved into mountains and clouds themselves. Stone towers rose between drifting cloud banks. Bridges connected rooftops. Flags snapped in the wind. Markets spilled into the streets. Tiny stalls, colorful awnings, smoke rising from food stands. Guards stood at the gates, armored and alert, watching everything with sharp eyes. Dave stopped walking. Okay, that's actually insane. Hash whispered, Yeah, I take it back. Worth the walk. Wise exhaled slowly, smoke drifting into the mountain air. There it is, boys. Charizard nodded. Stay sharp. Big cities mean big rules. Dave immediately straightened up. I can follow rules. Hash looked at him. No, you can't. Dave, I can try. Wise leaned on his staff, looking toward the winding streets. All right, listen up. Dave and Hash immediately pretended to stand at attention. Mission, Wise said, we get into the city, blend in. Hash raised a hand. Define blend. Wise ignored him. We find the alleyway market. Dave nodded slowly. The goblin one? Wise grinned. Yeah, the goblin one. Hash's eyes lit up. The one with the best dwarf weed in all of Wiseridon? Wise tapped his nose. Exactly that one. Dave put a hand over his heart. This is what we train for. Charizard sighed quietly. You didn't train. Dave, emotionally, I did. They approached the city gates together. Guards stood tall, watching them carefully. Wind swept through the entrance, carrying scent of food, smoke, metal, and magic. Voices echoed faintly from inside, bargaining, laughing, living. Wise took one last sip of coffee, exhaled a slow, steady plume of smoke. All right. He looked at his crew. Charizard, calm, steady flame. Dave, barely contained chaos. Hash, philosopher nonsense. Let's go find that market. Dave whispered, and the weed. Hash added, and the vibes. Charizard stepped forward. Wise followed, and together, the four of them entered Cloudwatch Peak, where the real mission began. Chapter 6. The Goblin Alley and the Return to Crystal Lake. The gates of Cloudwatch Peak swallowed them whole. Inside, the city hummed 1,000 sounds. Merchants calling, anvils ringing, laughter bouncing between stone walls, and everywhere, the smell of roasting meat and something sweeter underneath, like candied smoke. Wise scanned the bustling streets. Eyes narrowed. Stalls lined every corner, selling enchanted trinkets, glowing potions, and food that steamed in impossible colors. Guards patrolled in pairs, armor glinting in the mountain light. All right, Wise said quietly. The Goblin Alley isn't on any map. You find it by following the smell. Dave sniffed the air dramatically. I smell everything. Hash closed his eyes, pipe dangling from his lips. No, you got a filter. Past the bread, past the metal, past the perfume lady. There, Hash said, eyes snapping open. He pointed down a narrow gap between two buildings that most people would walk right past. A thin curl of green-tinted smoke drifted out from the shadows. Wise grinned. That's our alley. They slipped into the gap one by one. The walls were so close Charizard's shoulders nearly brushed both sides. The light faded. The sound of main streets muffled into something distant and dreamlike. And then the alley opened up into a hidden courtyard, lit by dozens of floating lanterns that cast everything in a warm, hazy amber glow. Goblins, everywhere. Small, wiry, sharp-eyed, and grinning. They sat behind makeshift stalls built from crates and mushroom wood, their wares displayed in tiny jars, pouches, and carved boxes. The air was thick with the unmistakable scent of dwarf weed. Earthy, sweet, slightly electric, like the forest itself had been bottled. A goblin with enormous ears and a top hat that was far too large for his head waddled forward. Customers. Ah, yes. Welcome to Grix's finest herbals. He rubbed his tiny hands together. You look like connoisseurs. Dave puffed up. We are. Hash nodded solemnly. Scholars of the leaf. Wise leaned down to Grix's level. We're looking for the good stuff. The real stuff. Dankwood-grown, dwarf-cured, triple age. Grix's eyes went wide. Then he grinned so hard his ears wiggled. Oh, you know your herbs. Follow me. I keep the premium in the back. They followed Grix past rows of lesser blends. Tourist grade, as Hash muttered dismissively, through a beaded curtain into a back room that smelled like a concentrated forest. Glass jars glowed faintly on shelves. Labels read things like Moonroot Haze, Ember Kush, Cloud Op Chill, and the one they all zeroed in on, Crystal Dank. Grix lifted the jar reverently. Grown at the edge of Crystal Lake, watered by enchanted streams, cured in dwarven caves for 6 moon cycles. He opened the lid. The aroma hit them like a warm, green wave. Dave's frog eyes went enormous. That's the one. Hash actually took off his hat. Respect. Wise inhaled deeply, eyes closing. Yeah, we'll take all of it. Charizard stood at the door, arms crossed, fire magic dimmed to a subtle warmth. He didn't partake, but even he nodded slightly. Smells clean, he admitted. Grix weighed out generous portions into leather pouches, chattering about growing techniques and the secret dwarven curing process. Gold coins change hands. Dave tried to haggle, and somehow ended up paying more. Hash got a free sample by complimenting Grix's hat for 10 straight minutes. Wise tucked the pouches into his satchel, patted Grix on the head, and grinned. Pleasure doing business. Grix waved all 4 arms. Come back anytime. Tell your friends. But not the guards. They slipped back through the alley, through the bustling streets, and out through the city gates. The mountain air hit them clean and cold. Wise took a deep breath. Mission accomplished, boys. Dave clutched his pouch like a newborn. I've never been this happy. Hash was already sniffing his sample. We need to smoke this immediately. Wise looked at Charizard. You know where we're going. Charizard's lips twitched. Almost a smile. Crystal Lake. Crystal Lake, Wise confirmed. The walk back was lighter, faster, fueled by anticipation. They retraced their steps down the mountain paths, to the Danquood's winding trails, past the trippy wizard tower. Cody waved from a window and shouted something incomprehensible, until the trees thinned and the shimmering expanse of Crystal Lake spread before them once again. The sun was low now, painting the sky in strokes of orange, purple, and gold. The lake reflected every color, doubled, tripled, shimmering like liquid stained glass. Home, Dave croaked softly. For tonight, Hash added. Charizard walked to the shore and knelt. He placed both hands on the ground. Fire magic pulsed outward, and from the earth itself, a ring of stones rose in a perfect circle. Another pulse, and a stack of drywood appeared at the center, gathered from the forest floor by controlled tendrils of heat. One final flick of his wrist, and the bonfire roared to life. Not a small campfire. A bonfire. Massive. Warm. Golden flames licking the twilight sky. Sparks drifting upward like tiny stars returning home. The firelight danced across the lake's surface, turning the water into molten gold. Now that, Dave said, dropping on the grass, is a fire. Hash sat cross-legged beside him. Char, you've outdone yourself. Charizard sat down slowly, the fire reflecting in his steady eyes. It's just fire. Wise laughed. It's never just fire with you, buddy. Wise pulled out the crystal dank. The pouch practically hummed in his hands. He opened it slowly, ceremonially, and the aroma drifted out, mingling with the bonfire's smoke and the cool lake breeze. He rolled the first leaf with practiced hands, long and perfect, and lit it from the bonfire's edge. The first inhale was transcendent. Smoke curled out of him in slow, golden spirals, catching the firelight and drifting over the lake like tiny ghosts. The taste was earthy, sweet, electric, like tasting the forest and the lake and the sky all at once. Wise's eyes went half-lidded. His shoulders dropped. A grin spread across his face. Oh, yeah, he breathed. That's the stuff. He passed it to Dave, who inhaled with the reverence of a monk receiving a sacred text. Dave's enormous frog eyes practically sparkled. I can taste the moon cycles, he croaked. Hash took his turn, exhaling a perfect ring that drifted out over the lake, caught the firelight, and shimmered gold before dissolving. 6 moon cycles of perfection, he whispered. They passed the leaf around the bonfire, smoke swirling upward with the sparks, mixing with the twilight colors. Charizard sat among them, fire magic keeping the bonfire steady, not too hot, not too wild, just perfect. He didn't smoke, but the warmth in his expression said everything. This was his way of being part of it. The lake reflected the scene. 4 figures around a massive bonfire, smoke and sparks rising into a sky painted with every color the world had to offer. Fish leapt in the shallows, their scales catching firelight. Mushrooms along the shore glowed in rhythm with the crackling flames. Somewhere, a night bird sang a low, haunting note that fit the moment perfectly. "You know what I love about this?" Wise said, staring into the fire. "No quest, no mission, no tower to climb. Just this." Dave nodded. "Fire, lake, smoke, friends." Hash smiled. "Simple math." Charizard added a log to the fire with a gentle push of magic. The flame surged briefly, sending a shower of golden sparks into the darkening sky. Sometimes simple is enough. They sat there as the stars came out, not just normal stars, but Wiseridon stars, faintly pulsing in purples and greens, arranged in constellations that told stories if you stared long enough. The bonfire crackled. Smoke drifted. Coffee was brewed in a pot balanced on the fire's edge, and they passed mugs around alongside the leaf. Dave tried to tell another story. It made no sense. Everyone laughed anyway. Hash attempted philosophy. It was mostly about worms again. Wise wheezed. Charizard caught a spark between his fingers and shaped it into a tiny phoenix that flew in circles above them before dissolving in a shower of gold. Even he smiled at that. Hours passed. Or minutes. Time meant nothing at Crystal Lake. Eventually, the fire burned lower, not out, never out. Charizard wouldn't let it, but softer, gentler. The embers glowed like a carpet of tiny suns. Smoke drifted in thin, lazy ribbons. The lake was perfectly still, reflecting the stars in the fading firelight. Wise leaned back on the grass, hands behind his head, gazing up at the impossible sky. "Best day," he said simply. Dave, half asleep on the grass beside him. "Best day?" Hash, pipe resting on his chest, eyes closed. "Best day?" Charizard, sitting upright, fire magic humming softly, keeping the embers alive. "Best day?" Wise smiled. He took one last, slow inhale from the leaf, held it, and exhaled a plume of smoke that rose straight and true into the star-filled sky, dissolving into night like a final, perfect thought. "Same time tomorrow," he murmured. Nobody answered. They were already drifting. Into sleep, into dreams, into the soft, magical heartbeat of Crystal Lake. The bonfire crackled softly. The lake shimmered. The stars pulsed overhead. And the smoky village, far in the distance, exhaled one last breath of mist into the night. The end.